Welcome to the TAE Aerospace Ipswich Jets after the AT, proudly brought to you with thanks to the Ipswich Jets Leagues Club, the heart of our community and a huge supporter of rugby league in Ipswich, and of course your Jets. Today we review our weekend game for our Hostplus Cup boys versus the Wynnum Manly Seagulls, and as our junior rep season draws to a close, review that with our very own Blake Mara, the Jets Pathways and Programs Manager. Since stepping into his role late last year, Blake has been a driving force behind our player development and pathway programs. His energy, his attention to detail, and his connection with our athletes, especially in the junior space, are helping build a stronger, more unified club every single day. As the Development Cup demonstrates, Blake's not just preparing players for the next level, he's building a culture that will last well into the future. You can already see the difference in how our pathways are coming together and how our young talent is progressing. Blake, good morning.
Thanks for having me on, Richard.
Thanks, mate. First of all, autumn weather in Ipswich compared to autumn weather in Toowoomba. Mate, what's worse or better? What do you prefer?
It is nice to get out of the cold. Recently made the move with Soph down to Springfield, so we're already starting to get the jumpers out in March in Toowoomba, so I'm very excited to be avoiding another Toowoomba winter this year, although I was saying no, we'll miss the place. It was a lovely place, but no, I'm loving the weather here in Ipswich. If only it could rain maybe once or twice less, that'd be awesome. So.
All right, well let's get on and talk about the game. Let's start with Big Kenny Mamalo. He had the first carry of the game, he had some big meters throughout the game and scored our first try. How impressive is he and what does he bring to the team?
Oh yeah, I mean, Kenny, 150 games at NRL and throwing some test matches for New Zealand. He's a very experienced player and we're very lucky to have him play for us every week. And yeah, he scored a try on the weekend, but obviously I think one of the most impressive things about his game is his carries, especially out of yardage. Sometimes he pins the ears back, sometimes he uses those late feet. He's really good at what he does there, and I was really surprised that teams keep deciding to kick off to Kenny, give him a big 30-metre run up. So maybe teams might start doing their video and kick the other way. But yeah, he was tireless on the weekend. So yeah, it was awesome.
Now you've been in that Clydesdale system, so you've been in a system with no affiliate. You're in a Jets that for a long time didn't have one, or didn't have an effective one. Now we have through the Titans. So from those two experiences, what do you see as some of that importance and relevance to having a really good relationship with an NRL affiliate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think obviously, yeah, it's a massive benefit having an affiliation. Obviously we didn't have one out at the West End Clydesdales, and that can make it, I guess, tough because those guys bring qualities, I guess, not only on the field but off the field as well. It's a professional career for them, so the way that they prepare for games and that sort of stuff rubs off on your playing group. And it kind of gives a bit of hope as well to those guys who aren't contracted with an NRL team, but to know that you've got blokes like that around you playing every week, it means that there's going to be some attention on your game. So it gives you that bit of hope that, hey, if I keep performing well, I'm right under the nose of the right people. And saying that, I was involved at the Falcons as a player, involved with the Melbourne Storm affiliation, and I think it's one of those things that the clubs have just got to have a really good relationship, and I think you can see with what Ty's doing and his relationship with the guys at the Titans that not only the players but also the staff, he's building a really good connection with those players, a really good understanding with their staff, and it's creating a really harmonious environment. And I think that's been one of the many keys to our success so far this year.
And I think following on from that, then you'd agree that there's also a fine line between overusing that affiliate and having too many players coming back and not utilising local talent. So again, from your experience in systems, how difficult is that to find that right balance between using that expertise on those guys as well as our local talent and pathways?
Yeah, no, I think that is a really tricky thing to manage. Obviously, if the Titans were to send us 8 players, we're running 8 players out, and that leaves a few more local guys out of your squad, and that's really difficult from a coach's point of view to manage. And I think that's why I think in the Queensland Cup, teams having 2 or 3 affiliates actually sort of works. Yeah, otherwise, if you're just having too many players come back every week, it's hard to train and hard to prepare. So I think at the moment we're getting a really good balance. And we're really fortunate for that. But once again, it comes back to that cultural piece in the background. And once again, Ty's and his team of staff are doing a really good job of keeping everyone engaged. There's some blokes that are really unlucky to be missing out on the team at the moment. But being around a few times, you know that the season's only just begun, and by the end of it, everyone's going to play their part. And I think that's a really key thing that's being driven at the moment, is that it is a very good team environment that we're building here at the Jets. And everyone understands that everyone plays different roles, but everyone's role's important in its own way.
And I guess that also then brings up the importance of having a really good A-grade side as well, so that when those players aren't able to take their position at Hostplus Cup, they can still play in a competitive A-grade competition. That's something you would vouch for and advocate for?
Yeah, 100%. I think Star's doing a really good job in that A-grade space at the moment. It's always tricky. You're managing, your team's constantly changing by who's getting brought in and brought out of the squad. And we've tried to, we're employing a bit of a strategy this year to use it as a bit of a youthful space. So we've put up about 11 players from our Manly squad into there. They'll train with Queensland Cup Mondays and Wednesdays, and I think on the weekend Jabiri Mack debuted for A grade, which was a really good result. He was one of our more consistent performers across Meninga, and that's sort of starting to highlight that pathway that'll build, and that'll happen more and more. So, which once again, it's really awesome because you've got blokes that are up there, they're just on the cusp of Q Cup, and they're coming back and mixing with our juniors who are, just coming into the start of their Hostplus Cup journey. So, it's awesome, and I think there'll be other clubs out there that don't have the same thing that'll be envious of that. So.
Now, as you and I do, sometimes we digress and go off on a tangent, as we've just done then, and away from the game. Let's go back to the game. Let's talk about goal line defence and defence in general. Both you and I were at the game at the weekend. Wave after wave, their forward pack came through, and we stopped them, and that gave us, I guess, the confidence to build on our attack. How impressive was that in light of the powerhouse that is Wynnum? First time we've beaten them there in 9 years. We kept them scoreless in the second half, and we kept them to 6 overall. How important and how impressive was that defensive effort?
Yeah, it was awesome. I think there was a real barometer for where the team's at with the way they were defending their line on the weekend. You look at the teams in the NRL, I guess, that are going the best at the moment, and obviously the Bulldogs are right up there, and they've got, I guess, a lighter forward pack. And I know when we were, talking with Ty and doing some of our recruitment, we've got a couple of lighter forwards out there, and their ability to just keep turning up, fit guys like Brett Grunke and Ollie Pascoe and Brandon Clark. Some of their efforts on that try line, Blakey Lenihan as well, it was incredible. You have to give the whole team a rap for that. And I think that also, it just shows that team connection. One of our team members, John O'Rubin, is having a tough time at the moment, and everyone was really keen to put in a really good team performance for him on the weekend. And that resilience and keep turning up, I thought they showed a lot of guts and a lot of pride.
Mate, it's a good tie into the next question, about team first culture. This is now our 6th episode of this, and we talk about some of that star talent, Julian Christian. We talk about our wingers and how impressive they are, and obviously those half combination, it's working so well. So, with somebody like you that's been so integral to some of those recruitment conversations, some of that local pathway and talent, outside of those guys that we talk about on a regular basis, those ones that are showcasing, who is it that's impressing you in the engine room that maybe doesn't get that spotlight on them on a weekly basis? Yeah,
I think there's a few guys that probably go a little bit under the radar but contribute a lot. I mean, in the centres, Rashawn Denny this year, I think his defence has been really underrated. It helps having an experienced winger outside of him, but some of his defensive decisions are, they're little things that, sometimes we don't count the tries against as much as we count the tries for, and he saved a few tries this year with some great defensive reads. I think, Brandon Clark, he's played over 50 games at Queensland Cup, so hard to say he's underrated, but his efforts off the bench, sometimes it's not always the attacking plays, but once again, his efforts in defence. I thought on the weekend he made a few tackles that were really crucial we miss one of those tackles on the weekend, they score, maybe we don't win the game. So I think he's been really impressive. And the other couple of young guys too would be, I think Hayden Rowbotham, he's having his first sort of season in Cup where he's getting regular game time now. He's a new recruit to the club from North Devils, and I think he's been really impressive. And the other one, he didn't play on the weekend, unfortunately, due to a reshuffle, but Declan Hayden, he's played the first few rounds at fullback, and he's only young, so he's still going to be in that stage of his career at the moment where he's a little bit in and out of the squad, but he's got a really great work ethic towards his game, and I think over the next few years he'll really cement himself as a genuine Hostplus Cup player.
Just a general point, but I guess when you look at us, year compared to year on year, what makes it seem like the Jets click in 2025? I mean, this time last year we were bottom of the ladder. This time, 2025, we're top 4. Again, I talk to you more as a footy head than a person that's been involved in the Jets. So, what is it that can make a team change its whole mentality to be in a position where everybody's enjoying their football, the results are coming as a result of that, etc.? Like, what are you seeing as some of those key, improvements or areas that are good for the Jets?
I think really in a world that's sort of obsessed and fascinated by data and numbers, it's probably the little things that you can't measure. And I always find when you reflect on things when they've gone well, or maybe they haven't gone well, or they're starting to improve, I think it's the effort you're putting into little things. So I think an example of that is this year our Hostplus Cup squad with their induction, and like just to having that player meeting where they really, Ty sort of gave the team his vision for what he wanted the environment to be like, and it was like a 3 or 4 hour sort of induction session, but all the guys actually being a part of it and the effort that went into that process. I think that's like an example. Do you just rock up and have your first training session, or do you really get together and sort of connect on what are we trying to achieve here? The other one is just some of the people that we've actually brought to the club, like your Julian Christians and having Blake Lenahan and that back. I know they get 1,000 pats on the back for it, but there's a reason they do, and that's because the work that those guys are doing behind the scenes. Brett Grenke, on days off, he's got 8 or 9 blokes out training together, and they're the little things I think that no one really sees, but they're the things that when you're going well on the weekend, I think that's at the core root of it is just that connection. So, and I think Ty's doing a really good job of building great relationships with his players. You spoke before about the affiliations and players coming back, and that involves some tough conversations. And unless you know that your coach genuinely cares for you and cares for the team, sometimes that can lead to a bit of stone kicking. And so far, from what I've seen of the guys, in the most part, everyone's been doing what's best for the team. So hopefully everyone can take a bit out of the success we're having and stick at it.
And just to finish off from the weekend, again, you've talked about players coming back and having different conversations, and Alan Fitzgibbon being a prime example. Last week he's playing for the Titans. This week he drops back and plays for us, and again puts an amazing performance. I mean, how good is it watching run 90 metres down the wing and put himself in full gear and watch him put the ball over the line? Yeah,
well, if you think it's exciting when you're in the crowd, I can tell you it's even more exciting when you're a front rower and you've been defending your try line for a few sets like they have, and Dion comes up with an intercept, and one way or another it makes its way into Alan Fitzgibbon's hands, and you just got to watch him score. It's like a massive weight gets lifted off your shoulders when you're a player. So, and that's why players like Alan Fitzgibbon are, that's why they play these levels, is they can turn those little half opportunities and turn them into points, and that's massive. We don't score that try there, we get run down, we turn the ball over, etc. We got it. The game's still on. So, it was really exciting to watch.
Okay, now let's get to the interesting stuff for you.
Yeah.
I guess this gives us a really good opportunity, and some of the feedback that I've gotten in these early episodes is more about learning about the people behind the scenes or behind the players, and we get this opportunity with you. So, you've had experience with clubs like the Storms, the Eels, Panthers, Bulldogs. Being in these professional environments, how has that shaped the way you approach development here at the Jets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I guess the part for me is having been involved in all those clubs at what I would think at different stages of my journey and different roles. Obviously as a player at the Storm, they drive this absolutely incredible work ethic, as in like what's required to actually cut the mustard there. There's no shortcuts, and it's quite a humbling sort of environment, and I really enjoyed that as a player. I don't know if that's for everyone, but yeah, I definitely took that into some earlier parts of my coaching, and I think that I've quickly worked out that doesn't fit every environment. You can't coach your local under-15s team like you're at the Melbourne Storm. There needs to be a little bit of, I guess, taking little parts of it, but maybe not trying to apply that environment. So that's one of the first things I worked out, and then my time in Sydney was really exciting, I guess, just seeing how those big clubs sort of operated, and you take good things and you take little things maybe you think you could do better if you get the opportunity. So my role with Parramatta and Penrith, they were both based with like governing bodies. I was working for the NRL and New South Wales Rugby League, so my job at Penrith was overseeing like coach accreditation and all that, and that was massive, just to see what a massive area that is. There was like 650 teams or something ridiculous, and but no, I guess I took a lot out of that, not only just being in and around it, but just professionally in that role. But recently with the Bulldogs, obviously everyone can start to see now what they're building there, and I think I'm so lucky to have been there when I was, just at the time period it was. When I first was involved, they were in a really they were just starting to turn the wheels. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and obviously the way Phil Gould sort of just puts things in place and gets that wheel turning, and even at times when you first started, you're like, oh, I don't really know, is this all going to work? But then, as time went by the time that I unfortunately had to leave due to the Clydesdales and Bulldogs separating, you could really start to see what they were putting in place down there in Sydney. And yeah, I mean, I'm really happy for all the people that are starting to be a part of that success. So they've done some tough times there, and yeah, so it was, I guess, taking little parts of everything and trying to apply them to what fits the Jets.
And I think you touch on the Panthers and the Bulldogs both, who've been very impressive in that depth of talent, junior pathways coming through. Like, is that in itself, even just that, installed in you the importance of junior pathways and getting those right, so investing in that so that you have that pipeline of talent on a consistent basis? Yeah,
100%. I think there's a lot of similarities towards like Penrith type area to Ipswich, really. Like, they were right on that borderline of Parramatta, which is another big club, and we're similar here. We're right on the borderline of like a South Logan, and our areas sort of meet, and that's why it's super important that we're active in the community. We want the kids from our region playing for our teams and not travelling over the border, and a big part of that's obviously connecting with our community and making sure people feel like the Jets represents them, and then the second part of that is offering a product that's to the quality that people are after. If they know they're coming to the Jets training session, it's going to be Mickey Mouse, then there's no reason to go looking elsewhere if it's right here in your backyard.
Yeah. Now, through your career, you've worked both in game development and also in club pathways. One of the things that stands out with you, and sometimes we have quite robust conversations about it in respects to, I guess, more broader personal development as well as skill development for young players. I think it's interesting that you're seen as somebody so very relatable. You've always got the players' welfare and that people first mantra about you. How do you balance up those things with young players and trying to get them in the right space to put themselves first as well as footballers first?
Yeah, it's tricky. Everyone talks about team first, but at the root of everything, everyone's somewhat in things for themselves. So I guess it's about how do we build an environment that connects what the individual wants to get out of it to the team's goal, and then over time you build that relationship with the players, and then they do start putting the team first, and that's when you get your results. I think it's all a process, trying to build that into the club, not being too ruthless with it, but I guess for me, better better people do make better players in the end. Because when you watch footy, it's actually it's a tough game. You can't be out there if you're just in it for yourself. Everyone's relying on each other to do their job. So that was something we've started this year, but I think in the future we're going to get better and better at that. And at the end of the day, like on the off-field part, is a lot of these kids that we coach aren't going to have professional careers. Like that's the reality of it. But what can they take from being involved in the Jets and actually use that to be successful in other areas? I know myself, I haven't had a professional playing career, but I've still used a lot of what I've taken as a player and the environments I've been lucky enough to be in and the teams I've been lucky enough to be in, and use that to sort of shape my life. And one way or another, these kids are going to do that. So, and trickiest part about that is we all want to win footy games. So at the end of the day, we want to win footy games, and especially in these younger age groups, the kids that are going to win your footy games, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, but they're not always, I guess, just because you're the biggest, fastest, strongest doesn't make you the best teammate, doesn't make you mean that long term you're going to be the best player. So sometimes in junior coaching space, we need to give some tough love and make some tough choices, because I think if you let kids get away with certain behaviours that aren't going to lead them into a nice place in life, and you let them get away with that just because they're good at footy, I feel like we foul players like that. And that's why sometimes we have to make tough decisions and drive that person first mentality, because I think if players can have the resilience to overcome some of that and come around the corner, they come out of a better person. And whether they play a professional rugby league career or not, that's ultimately, I guess, why we get involved in sport.
And I think following on from that, those of us that were attending the presentation night, junior presentation night, heard you speak. And a couple of things stood out to me, hearing you, and you're a great communicator. You're really good, verbalising some really important stuff. And two things that really stood out was, one, making the players accountable for their own efforts and their own success in life. It's down to them as people. But I think more poignant was the fact that your angle of really appreciating the people that are around them, the people that take them to the football, that take them home after that presentation night. How important was that to convey that message, so that these kids, and they are kids, understand that it really is a group effort to ensure that they can achieve whatever it is to whatever level they get to.
To touch on that part, I guess, it's not until you become an adult and you get all these other commitments and bills and life starts to really encroach on your freedoms, that you actually realise how much of your time that your parents or whoever it is that looked after you when you're growing up, gave up for you. Nothing's free these days. It's all expensive. And times are tough. So I think, as a kid, it should be every kid's right to grow up in a household and have enough food on the table and all that sort of stuff. And that doesn't mean that everyone's lucky enough to have that, but it's still, regardless, I think kids just realise them to feel appreciative and how much that does only, I guess, for their family as well. So I think sometimes it's good for us just to highlight, hey, just be thankful that someone's bringing you to training, because there's probably someone out there who can't get to training, who's about to get cut from this Cyril Connell squad because they can't make it to training because no one's there to take them, or no one's there to pay for their uniform. So I think that's something that just reminding kids to be grateful about that, because there's a lot of pressure on these kids, and they're just focused on what's the next team, what's the next goal, where have I got to get to, and I think sometimes that robs us of the moment. You're actually in a team, you're doing something you love, you're hanging out with people, so we get a little bit away from that. So I think sometimes driving that message is important, and then obviously you said about the accountability. I'm sure there's every Hostplus Cup clubs, Cyril Connell, Mal Meninga and Harvey Norman's coaches have dealt with a player this year who they haven't picked, and it's always someone else's fault. I think as a junior player, mate, I made way too many excuses for myself, and I come from an environment where probably instead of looking internally why I didn't make teams, it was very easy to be like, this is wrong, or they should be doing this, or they don't know what they're doing. I think I come to learn that in my sort of mid-20s is just like, potentially, had I had some, a better outlook on some of those things, I reckon that would have made a difference to me. So that's why, as much as it can be harsh, sometimes I just try to do that for the players themselves. Like, hey, like whether you got picked or not, and whether it's right or wrong, you can't actually control that. You're not the coach. But whether you go and spend half an hour working on a skill, no one's going to take that half an hour off you in the long term, and that will add up. Too many players are just, we haven't made it by under 17s, and what's my next choice? Well, look at some of the people running around our Hostplus Cup club. You know, they haven't made every single team coming through. People do come on the scene late. So I actually remember playing local A grade with Rashawn Denny when he was 18 or 19. You know, and to be honest with you, like I was like, oh, he's going all right to be doing this, but didn't think much of it. And then, you know, years later to see he's done NRL pre-seasons and he's played a lot of Queensland Cup and he's going really well at the moment. You know, he wasn't someone that had made every team coming through. So, you know, there's plenty of examples of people that come from there, and I think that comes down to not putting too much pressure on yourself and taking some accountability for, you know, where you're at.
Which then, you know, we talk about, you know, if you don't make the team, what happens next? So one of the concepts that, you know, you brought to me towards the end of 2024 was the Development Cup. I know you're very quick to also recognise a lot of people associated with that, but certainly there was the original concept you brought to my desk and we had a conversation about it. Over its time, it took various iterations to get to a point where we got to where it was, but no doubt very successful.
Yeah.
You know, as it's been received by players and by, you know, everybody in the game in this region. So, you know, what has got you most excited about that, and how do you think that ties into a broader strategy? We won't talk about the future just yet, but how do you think that fits in, and what has that achieved? Has it gone beyond your expectations of how that's been received? Because it certainly seems that way within the local region of how much that's had an impact on our community.
Yeah, look, I'm really passionate about this little area. I guess it sort of started for me when I was working for the Bulldogs in Toowoomba. We started building all these academy systems up. You know, we had a far reach, but ultimately it all led to Cyril Connell, which had this little funnel, and we had done all this work with these other players that weren't far off that, but you can't have everyone in your Cyril Connell team. So there was just a real room for like, well, where are all these guys going to play? Because the club footy doesn't start till April. All these kids are training, and from January through to April, these other kids, what are they doing? Yeah, you can throw on some training sessions, but kids play sport to play the sport. They don't, you know, want to. No one watches Reece Walsh on the TV and goes, "I'd love to go and train." they want to play. So that was, and actually Phil Gould said it on one of his podcasts about just finding a level for everyone, you know, and he's really passionate about having, you know, Ron Massey Cup, which sits underneath Queensland Cup, and a lot of people go, oh, it's another, under New South Wales Cup, and a lot of people sort of look at that and go, oh, it's another thing we've got to do and look after, but it's important to keep people in the game, because if we keep them in the game long enough, eventually they do bubble up. And so Development Cup, having kids underneath Cyril Connell in that under 17 space who haven't quite made it, but here's an opportunity to graft and grind away. We ended up having one of them, young Traden Korahiki. He didn't make our 45-man squad for Cyril Connell at the start. He went to all the development sessions. He come to one of our positional specific clinics we ran, and next thing you know, he's playing Development Cup, and we needed him for that last round, and Cyril Connell, and he debuted. So there's a kid that thinking in October, oh, I've missed out. It's, you know, what am I going to do? And then before you know it, he's actually out there playing. So keeping people in the game is super important. I think as a game in a whole, I think we need to look at that. You know, look at that. When do we, you know, for example, like we know we got rid of representative footy, and I feel like there's definitely a space to go. Like, I don't think rep footy is the thing. It's about having that thing underneath. So obviously they're trying to get the RISE program developed now, which is a great concept in that 13s to 15s. So the more we can grow that pool of players, I guess the better. So
we've touched on it several times through the course of our chat. The fact that just, you know, being the most skilled or the fastest isn't going to necessarily put you in the team. It's clear for right now and into the future, you know, you'll be very much integral in that player identification into the future. For people and players watching on, you know, what is it that you look for when you're, you know, recruiting a Jets player?
I've talked to a couple of people about this with, like, you know, when you go to the footy and watch footy, like, that's one part of it. Usually it's someone does something, they have a moment in a game that stands out, and then after that you'll kind of watch that player and sort of study how they sort of interact from there. So it's not just like, oh, you scored a 80-metre try, put him on the list. It's watch, okay, what are they like now? Are they selfish? Are they energetic? Are they involved in the game? All those sort of things. Obviously, outside of the, I guess, basic stuff that you would look for in a rugby league player. But the other part I've always been big on is doing my, I guess, due diligence on a player away from footy. You know, so I work out where do they go to school, let's ring some of their teachers, see what they're like in that part of life. How do they conduct themselves around the junior club? You know, are they wearing uniform, or do they rock up in their Lakers gear while everyone else wears their Redbank Plains uniform? You know, that's the kind of stuff that I look for, is like, what's this player going to be like as a part of our squad? And yeah, so it's not just what you do on the field, it's a bit of what you do off the field.
I mean, lastly, you know, the community connection is important. How are you finding that? What are you doing to build that success through our development programs at a local level?
I think a big part of it's being present. You know, a lot of people give up a lot of time as volunteers to be involved in our games. So I think us ones who are lucky enough to be paid have got to, you know, make sure that they felt like they're supported. And you know, it's really exciting now that the Rugby League Ipswich junior season's about to kick off. I'm so excited to be down there and watching the kids run around. And yeah, I think that's a massive part, because without them, who are we out playing for on the weekend? You know, our Hostplus Cup team's in a really rich vein of form at the moment, and things are going well, and that's who we represent. So it's really important that we stay connected with those people.
I guess I should have predicted this, but we've talked way longer than anybody else.
Yep.
And in that time, now the Leagues Cup's open, hence we have lots of people going behind us.
Yes.
You're going to always achieve the longest chat, because it's easy to talk to you. You're so passionate, you're so good at what you do. You're a massive asset to this club, and we're grateful for everything you've done. I'm sure that the juniors are too. So Blake Mara, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's a wrap up of our episode of TAE Ipswich Jets, after the AT proudly brought to you with thanks to the Ipswich Jets Leagues Club. Big thanks to Blake, who gave up his time here this morning. And don't forget our next game on the 4th of May against Northern Pride. Tickets from our website or at the gate. If you can't make it, it'll be our first TV game of the year on KO, and our kick-off is at 2:10 p.m. So please stay tuned, make sure you like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time as we bring you all things Ipswich Jets.